Bacteria, we all know they are a type of biological cells and they constitute a large domain of the prokaryotic organisms, right? They are prokaryotes and they vary in their, size. They are few micrometers in length and they have number of shapes also, which also varies from, round to sphere to oval to rod to spiral and many, many shapes, right? So bacteria are basically omnipresent everywhere. We all know there are around 40 million bacterial cells in a gram of soil and a million bacterial cells in a milliliter of fresh water. So that means that, we are all the time exposed to all the types of bacteria. And in humans and most animals, the largest number of bacteria exists in the gut and a large number appears in the skin also, right? So vast majority of the bacteria in the body are rendered harmless by the protective effects of the immune system. And though many are beneficial also, particularly in our oral flora, right? But several species of bacteria, we all know they are pathogenic and they cause infectious diseases, including cholera, syphilis, anthrax, leprosy, bubonic plague, diphtheria, many, many diseases, right? So here I'm not going into details, but we all know that bacteria, they are of many shapes, and we all know their shapes. They vary from cocci to bacilli to being spiral shaped to being slightly curved rod to being a spirochete, many shapes, right? And they can be star shaped also in some cases, it has been seen. But the most important characteristic of bacteria comes when we talk about the cell wall of bacteria, right? That is the most important characteristic. So here we all know that the bacterial cell wall is surrounded by a cell membrane, which is made up of phospholipids, right? And this membrane basically acts as a barrier to hold nutrients, proteins, and other essential components of the cytoplasm within the cell. Right. And the most important thing that you know about the nucleus, that bacteria do not round nucleus, and their genetic material is typically a circular bacterial chromosome of DNA located in the cytoplasm in an irregular shaped body that's called the nucleoid. And nucleoids contain chromosome with its associated proteins and RNA, right? So the important thing is that around the outside of the cell membrane is the cell wall, and bacterial cell walls are made up of peptidoglycan. Okay, and this peptidoglycan is also known as urine, which is made from polypeptide chains which are cross-linked to each other. So bacterial cell walls are very different from the cell walls of the plants and fungus, which are made up of cellulose and chitin, respectively. So for plants we have cellulose, and for fungus we have chitin. But bacterial cell wall is made up of peptidoglycan. So that's very important, property, because broadly speaking, of that this two different types of cell wall in bacteria, where they have a thicker peptidoglycan layer and a less of the teichoic acid in them, and a thinner peptidoglycan layer and more of teichoic acid in them, classifies the bacteria into gram positive and gram negative. So gram positive bacteria, we all know they have a wall, thick cell wall that contains many layers of peptidoglycan and teichoic acid. In contrast, gram-negative bacteria have a relatively thin cell wall consisting of a few layers of peptidoglycans that's surrounded by a second lipid membrane containing lipopolysaccharides and lipoproteins. Right? When we are talking about the infections, the basic thing that we need to know about bacteria is, we are going to talk about these basic diseases today, okay, which are caused by bacteria. So we'll talk about scarlet fever, diphtheria, tuberculosis, leprosy, actinomycosis, botyromycosis, tetanus, syphilis, gonorrhea, cat scratch disease, and rhinocleroma. So as we've already talked, bacteria, they are large domain or kingdom of prokaryotes, and typically a few micrometers in length. They have a wide range of shapes ranging from spheres to rods and spirals. So as you can see, for bacteria, the structure is usually they are cells and they're surrounded by a cell wall, whereas viruses are not cells and they are just nucleic acid core with a protein coat. Okay. And for the bacteria, when we talk about living conditions, most can survive and reproduce outside a host, whereas viruses are parasitic and they need a host cell to reproduce. Whereas when we talk about susceptibility to drugs, then most of the bacteria can be killed or inhibited by antibiotics, whereas the viruses cannot be killed with antibiotics and can be just inhibited with some antiviral drugs that are available. So as I told you, based on their thickness of the cell wall and the presence of the teichoic acid, there are broadly two categories of bacteria: gram positive and gram negative. So in the we have many varieties under them, but what we need to know when we are talking about infections is that in the gram positive category we have Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, Clostridium, Actinomyces, and Corynebacterium. And in the gram negative category we have the Spirochetes. So first we talk about scarlet fever. Now scarlet fever is also known as scarlatina. It's basically a very contagious systemic infection that results from group A streptococcus infection that's also known as your Streptococcus pyogenes. So they are also known as beta hemolytic streptococci, and the basic thing is that they produce a pyrogenic exotoxin. So they produce a pyrogenic exotoxin due to which there is rash and there is fever that basically occurs. And basically, scarlatina affects the children. And there are three types of exotoxins produced by beta hemolytic streptococci or Streptococcus pyogenes. That is A, B, and C. And these are together known as erythrogenic or scarlet fever toxins. Okay, and they are pyrogenic exotoxins. That is, they produce a characteristic rash. So basic entry of the bacteria is through pharynx. It has an incubation period of 3 to 5 days, and then there it causes severe pharyngitis, tonsillitis, headache, chills, fever, abdominal pain, and vomiting. And there is enlargement and tenderness of cervical lymph nodes also associated. So what then comes as the characteristic sign is that there is development of diffuse, bright, scarlet skin rash that is developed on second, third day of the illness. Okay. So this rash is develops and this rash is red in color and it feels like sandpaper. Okay, so the last line here I've written is that small papules of the normal color they erupt through these rashes. Okay, so that gives a sandpaper feel to the skin. So this is the sandpaper rash. It's very red in color and white papules have erupted through it. So when you touch it, it has a very cold surface. So it's that is why it's believed to given the name as the sandpaper skin. Also, in the areas of the skin folds, some lines they develop which are known as the fascia lines. Okay, and these lines, they are developing in the areas of the. We say that basically it's a clinical sign. These fascia lines in which the pink or the red lines are, formed of confluent petechiae, and they are found in the crease of your antecuboidal fossa, like you have here in your arm, your antecuboidal fossa, soft depression on the inside of the arm. Folding crease divides this fossa where the where the forearm meets the upper arm. So all these areas. So it generally occurs in patients with scarlet fever prior to the appearance of the rash, and then it persists pigmented lines after desquamation. Okay. So these fascia lines they develop in the areas of the skin fold, and they are red in appearance. And otherwise, the rashes which appear, the characteristic rash, they blanch on pressure and they have a sandpaper feel to the skin. So when we talk about the oral manifestations, the oral cavity when it develops this scarlatina, it's known as stomatitis scarlatina, and small punctate red macules are seen on soft palatal uvula, and they are known as Forsheimmer spots. Okay, Forsheimmer spots. Also, the palate and throat they are fiery red. So we have streptococcal pharyngitis which is the usual presentation of the scarlet fever in combination with the characteristic rash. This is the parotid duct, and this whole